What if I told you in the next few years, AI is going to rewrite how you work, how you watch sports, how you manage your health, and even more, how you even think? Well, this is a new kind of format where we're going to talk AI, and it's going to be called Let's Talk AI, where I pretty much come to you with everything in terms of discussing the pros and the cons and let you ask questions that they don't let you ignore. Meaning you can come into the table, ask so much questions, and it's my job to give you the answers. So it won't get ignored. This is kind of like a new format, a new series that I'm introducing to AIwithFizzy. Before we jump into today's video, I want to give you a quick kind of glance tour in terms of what these series, Let's Talk AI, will be about. And predominantly it's going to be things such as, we're going to explore both sides of the argument, the upside as well as the danger. We're going to question everything. We're going to see whether or not it's going to be suitable for society or detrimental for society. And what I'm going to do is bring home to you and things of what to watch, what to look out for, and things that you should probably start questioning yourself. So if you like this kind of taste and this kind of flavor, I would really appreciate if you can like, share, and subscribe. And that really helps with the algorithm. And plus, build a community. My aim is to build an AI community first. No matter your knowledge in AI, it could be beginner, intermediate, expert. We're all here to learn off each other, and we're all here to pose the questions around AI. And I think that's not being done enough in the space. I think we're just taking AI for what it is instead of questioning, does it actually better society? So yeah, this is the first episode of the series of many to come, and I hope you like this one, but check this one out. Let's go. All right, cool. So the first one, we've got Google's DeepMind agentic robotic can now not just see and move, but do web searches and complete multiple tasks all at one go. Now I've got a video that I'm going to show you while I'm talking as well, but this is monumental. And you've probably seen videos like this before, where either on TikTok or Instagram videos or Reels, where you see videos pick up items and probably see robots dancing, and you probably see robots trying to sing, etc. It's all funny videos, all humor, but we've got to look at it in a sense of, from a Google's perspective, what they've managed to do is develop an agentic robot that can complete multiple tasks and leverage the internet to ensure that it's doing it correctly. So what that means is we're having machines not only thinking for themselves, but also speaking with each other. And this is a really revolutionary step, especially within AI. So think of it in terms of, you may ask the robot to take out the trash, right? Now what the robot will probably then do is understand what type of trash is taken out. It could be recycling, it could be normal trash. How does it differentiate that? Now with Google's new agentic robot, it can now distinguish between what should be recycled and what should not be recycled. It can even take it further, and you can send a request to say, hey, and you'll see in the video shortly, it's gonna say, hey, can I please, or can you please actually put my scarf or my hat in my luggage bag, and it will do it for you. As well as you can ask it on top of mind questions like, what would the weather be like next week when I'm traveling? Or what would the weather be like in this particular country if I travel at this particular time? And it'll give you real-time answers. So it can only not just do one thing, but it can also handle multiple tasks. And it's now becoming to a world, well, soon coming to a world in AI, where robots will now be able to not just see and move things, but also be able to talk to each other. Now, there's certain pros and there's certain cons to this, but I want you to have an open mind. Because I know when we talk about robots and AI, everyone's thinking about the new world is going to change and we're all going to be under the control of robots. But there are really good pros to this. And if you come with an open mind, you can understand both sides of the argument. Now, I'm more inclined to say I don't know yet, because I need to see the more ethical approach towards this. And that I haven't seen yet since I've been reading up and doing my research. However, let's check out the video in terms of what it can do, and let's circle back about the pros and the cons for this. So what are the pros? Well, you can see it's going to be more adaptable. Robots that can tackle a variety of tasks. In the video, you can probably see that it's able to handle throwing away trash into the right compartment. It can also do several other things, as well as helping you pack for a holiday, but also giving you information about your destination, which is pretty cool at the same time. And then we could talk about reduced human labor in dangerous or tedious environments. So again, if we're thinking about, taking out the trash, it could be quite tedious for some, or, being able to clean. It can help take care of the home while you're away. So certain things that a human labor will tend to do, we can actually offset to a robot, and it can do it quite effectively and quite efficiently as well, especially now that robots can now leverage other machines to kind of talk to each other, to kind of understand what does it mean when I'm being told this particular task. And we can't talk about robots without innovation, right? This will only speed up innovation within robotics and AI. DeepMind and Google's agentic R1.5 is just probably the stepping stone. As it continues to grow and it continues to learn, it can adapt and do much more tasks. This only boosts innovation across all companies involved in the next agentic robotic field. So those are really good pros, but then we got to talk about the cons. Data accuracy. Now, we can't talk about algorithms or machine learning without the data that's involved. Robots learn off data. And if robots are relying on web information, that in itself is so risky. Not everything on the internet is deemed truth. So how is the robot able to identify what is bad info to what is good info? Because bad info can lead to a bad action. Imagine it's trying to search the web and it searches in the wrong constituency or searches in the wrong country where recycling is not deemed as important, and it probably puts the trash all into one compartment. The next thing is talking about security and hacking. If an agent can access web tools, it could also be manipulated. Now we'll talk about cybercrimes and cybersecurity, but there's a huge potential risk here that once the agent is being able to access the web, it can lead itself to be vulnerable. And from it being vulnerable, it can then be manipulated through hackers. And then we talk about job displacements in certain domains. For example, logistics, manual tasks, hospitality, cleaning, etc. What does this say for the human nature of this? So there's pros and there's definitely cons here. And I would say, again, in the beginning, have an open mind. This is one step to a larger innovation within the robotics and AI industry. Fantastic, great. This is something that can help with menial tasks that humans kind of deem not necessary, which can lead us to be more productive in other tasks that we see necessary. So it can take a huge load off of human tasks that we just don't want to be involved in anymore. However, that can lead to job displacements, as well as bad info can equal to bad action. If it's searching the web, having access to the web, and speaking and communicating with the web, not everything in the web is true. How is it going to distinguish between what is bad information versus what is good information? I'll leave that kind of pondering in your mind. But the thing I want you to watch out for is 3 different things here. And the first one is, will they guard against misinformation? How agencies regulate autonomous agents that make decisions? And how this tech filters down to consumer level. So think of it as, and when you think about these questions and what to watch is, how can we be basically trusting that the information that it receives from the web is truthful and it's going to have good intentions, that it's not searching misinformation? How can we also ensure that it filters down to consumer level? So again, it's not just produced for a specific type of person. It should be able to be having access to everyone. Can Google's DeepMind ensure that this particular robot agentic that's actually produced can be used for everyone, not just the minority, but predominantly for the majority? And that's really important. As well as thinking about, how do we ensure that it is autonomous? Do we ensure that basically we have a separate panel who look into these things to whether decide, actually really important, are these robots fit for purpose? I'm curious to understand how you feel towards this. Do you feel like we're going into the right direction with robots and AI? Do you think it's a good thing that we're having machines talk to each other and learn from each other to also produce and do multiple tasks? And also, are you more on the concerned wagon? Are you more concerned on, hey, I'm just not too sure about job security for those who currently work in those fields? I'm not too sure about when it's accessing the internet, it's going to pull out the right intentions and the right data, as opposed to the wrong intentions and the wrong data. The internet is massive, huge, and it's very, very easy for the robot to make a mistake. So what kind of decide are you on? What questions do you pose? Leave them down below in the comment section and I'll be more than happy to answer them and give my impartial view. Like I said, these are Let's Talk with AI, and I'm not here to create a biased view. I'm here to kind of share both the pros and the cons and things to watch out for. I'm in the same boat as you. I'm literally torn between whether or not it's good and ethical for humanity or whether it's bad and it should probably not be released to humanity. But let's dig into another topic and we can discuss more. Alright, so you've probably heard about DeepMind, which is Google, but have you heard about DeepSeek, which is China's alternative to Google's DeepMind? Now, DeepSeek was kind of introduced in China around the early 2025. It has now grown exponentially fast in China to the extent where it's now overtaken ChatGPT as the most downloaded generative AI tool that is currently being used in China. Now, in that being said, it's now pushing through very, very advanced breakthroughs and has the potential to go open source as well. But probably the question is, why does it matter? So we've got to think about it in terms of its rising competition to the non-Western world, which some will say was really good and some will say is really bad. But the open source carries both an opportunity and a risk here. And this is what I want you to think about in terms of what does that mean? Well, if something is open source, that means a developer or anyone can come in and tweak and alter the model. In most cases, it's for the beneficial and the good of the model. So, you're having loads of developers come in, add a few programming into the model to kind of boost its, I would say, intuitiveness and being able to adapt. So in case of constant innovation, you have that locked in because you have so many developers coming in. However, not all developers are good developers. And some developers may push harmful code that can later on or in real time affect many of the users that are currently using the tool. So open sources has its really good pros, but also has its cons as well. But then we also got to think about the non-Western approach. That means China will have its own sets of regulations and all sets of rules that will be totally different to the Western approach of America or Europe. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Are we ready to have two kind of separate giant AI models that potentially are not in the same category or same realm as being centralized and following the same rules and regulation, is what I'm trying to get to. So this is the part where I come in and I say, okay, what are the pros and what are the cons and what are the things to watch out for? So let's start off with there's going to be more innovation from diverse players. Decentralization of AI, less dominance from big firms. We know who you are. But also there's a few cons, right? And a few risks. There's regulation and oversight vary across regions, potential for misuse. And then we've got to talk about quality and trust. How do we ensure the model's outputs are reliable? So here we've got to think about it in terms of more innovation, in my opinion, is very good for humanity. We've got to think about how we've innovated over the past 20 years. Think about our phones. How has our phone innovated? We've come from the Nokias to now the Apple iPhones to the Samsungs to the Huaweis. There's so much more players in the game as well. Innovation is key. It kind of boosts competition, which is great. But also we've got to think about the cons here. And, one of the cons is about regulation and oversight. How can we ensure that the regulation is not as impactful, if not very much should be in tune to what the Western approach is? What happens there? So those are three things to think about here. And it probably won't be much more to impact us, but we also got to think about it in terms of if we're having so much machines or AI models being built, we can also lose control. And once you lose control, and that's when the fear of machines take over. So it's more so of how do we ensure that we can control not only things that are being made in the non-Western world, but as well as in the Western world. Again, I'm torn here. I'm all about innovation and free business, and I love competition. I think that's really important. But I also got to think about it in terms of how do we ensure that the regulation is continuous and it's not one rule for one and another rule for another. So what are the kind of things to watch out for? Well, DeepSeek can actually scale very globally. It's not tied to just selling in China, it's really across the world. This could be adopted very, very quickly. Similar to how it was adopted in China, it could be adopted in Europe, as well as in America. ChatGPT is not the only player in the game with generative AI. There's Gemini, there's Microsoft Copilot. And now DeepSeek is staking its claim as being very, very adamant in taking over. It's done so already in China. What's not to say that it can scale even further to a more global approach in EU, in America. So that's probably one thing to watch out for. Another thing I would say is the open source. Now, if it's open source, are we given the opportunity for it to be, I'm going to say it, tampered with? which is a very, very likelihood of happening. Like I said, not all developers are good developers. And we could come across a situation where people's information can get sold or misled or stolen. And these things is, how do we monitor that? And it goes back to the regulation. So open source, again, has its pros and its cons. However, I'm always on the side of, again, being very impartial, of just caution with it. I'm all about innovation, but if everybody has access to it in terms of being able to develop, I would like to say there's good developers out there, but we've also got a caveat that there is some bad developers with bad intentions. And another one is, how would governments respond? Again, censorship, regulations, these things matter. And this is something that I believe every single government and party should have a seat at the table to discuss how this particular tool, once it reaches the global platform, how do we control it? And I think that's probably the next step, I believe, for DeepSeek. If it does continue to grow and it looks like it's growing exponentially well, how do we as humans come together and say, this is the approach that we're going to take in terms of making sure it's regulated? It has to be the same rule for every AI company or AI tool being developed. But that's my opinion. And this is where I come to you, is what's your thoughts and feelings on this? What's your questions about this? Do you think this is going to be good? I mean, you could be on the side of, hey, Fizzy, having literally an open source platform could be great. We can learn off each other. We're boosting innovation. And that kind of gives a sense of we, as humans, are effectively promoting and pushing AI. And we're doing it at our level. But there's also going to be cons. How do we trust those that are actually coding into DeepSeek's model? All right, cool. So let's talk about the next story here. And this one's more about AI and the kind of investments that's going into it. And there's been a huge amount of investment. Majority seems to come from the States, and the US are starting to develop more, I would say, access to AI. And through doing that, they've allowed a lot of investors and holding companies and groups kind of come together and build and kind of strive AI to a more, I'll say, equilibrium frame. And what this means is, in 2024, we saw 109 billion worth of investment into AI, according to Stanford, right? This is a lot of money. Bearing in mind, AI hasn't been around for such a long time. So what does that mean then? Does that mean that everybody's racing at the forefront to get involved in AI? Is everyone trying to be the #1 spot in AI? Now, when we're talking about other things in terms of investment in AI, we should also think about what it could do in terms of boosting innovation. Not all investments will go according to plan, and not all investments will, again, be suitable for society. But it does kind of show a lot of flags here, which is AI is moving exponentially fast. But what's moving even just as faster is the amount of money being pumped into AI. So what does that mean? What's the pros and what's the cons for this? And how does it even affect us moving forward? Well, the pros here. We could look at it in terms of there'll be rapid progress, more compute and more capability. More money means more access, more support, more help. It also gives you access. You get to take the brightest minds and put them into a room to kind of build AI, or even better, make it even more stronger than it already was. That's what Meta's done, really. But then you could talk about specialized hardware means more efficient and more powerful models. But that's the only kind of pros I can think towards this. Now we've got to look about the cons, and it's more about concentration. Only big players can afford cutting-edge chips and infrastructure. Environmental cost. AI training and inference uses massive amount of energy. And then we've got to talk about supply chain and geopolitical risk in chip manufacturing. So take a quick step back here. And if you haven't heard about this company, I'm going to tell you about the company today. NVIDIA, right? It's raised a lot of buzz in the tech world and the tech industry in terms of its super fast microchip. It's done amazing results in how it integrates AI with its microchips, and a lot of companies are literally flooding a huge amount of money into NVIDIA because it's predominantly ahead of its game, and compared to competitors, it's literally got the most cutting edge AI when it comes to microchips. Now, if we're looking at it in terms of affordability, it seems that the lower, less players kind of lose out here. Are we building more of a monopolistic society towards AI? And if so, that doesn't seem to be beneficial for humans. But then we've got to look at it in a different way. We've got to look at it in terms of progress. There's no doubt that AI is progressing extremely fast and rapid. Some may say too rapid, but maybe we need this kind of rapid, fast pace in order for us to get to a place, a society, where we work in tangent with these AI models. But what are the things to watch out for here? Well, one thing we've got to be very cautious of is just smaller players missing out. Smaller players, smaller companies won't have the access or the ability to afford or have these super intelligent AI chips, tools, robotics in their infrastructure to build, because it's been predominantly handled by the big players. So how does that create fairness across the tech industry? And then we've got to look about in terms of environmental regulations and pressure towards them. We've got to look at it in terms of it takes a lot and a massive amount of energy to produce certain AI capabilities. Microchipping, for example, is one. That energy can be at the detriment of Earth. Are we harming our own habitable zone in terms of Earth in order to progress AI? Then it comes to a question of, do we favor more building AI quickly, or do we, in the expense of actually, potentially causing a lot more harm to Earth? And then we've got to look about it in terms of new architectures, which is deemed as good. Things to watch out for is going to be new waves of AI. You've probably heard and seen them before. You probably know about them. But there'll be new waves of AI. With more money pumped into AI, that just boosts a lot more, I would say, competition, but as well as innovation. So those are kind of things to watch out for and to look out for as the space of AI continues to grow and develop. It's also a good thing to look at in terms of how does it benefit myself? How does it benefit my community or my social community? Is it something that I can live with long term? Okay, so let's zoom out a bit and let's go about what we've just discussed today. Well, we've discussed about agentic AI, autonomous agents really. Generative models are evolving. Next, we get AI agents, models that think and act, agents that can carry out multiple step tasks, which change how we interact with AI. It's no longer just ask and respond, but delegating tasks. And now we've got regulations and safety. The 2025 AI Safety and Action Summit shows how governments are stepping in. The International AI Safety Report flagged the risk of privacy violation, misinformation, and misuse of deepfakes and model failures. Well, the tricky balance here is regulate too much and you stifle innovation. too little and you risk disaster. And then we've got to talk about trust and bias. Models memorize. Privacy attacks show that data they leak. And Camia is one new attack that reveals what models remember. And then we're going to talk about democratization versus concentration. AI could empower anyone, but infrastructure and capital remain concentrated. The biggest fear right now in the tech industry is that a few big players may control our digital future. And lastly, the human factor. AI should augment and not replace. Emotional intelligence, ethics, and context, humans have the edge there. You in your life. Well, let me bring this to you. Let's talk about professions will actually shift. If you think about it in terms of not all jobs will be taken away or castrated from AI or by the cause of AI, but the task inside them will always evolve. And it's about adapting to your upskills and making sure that you stick within the game. Long story short is, AI is going to have some part to play in everyone's roles, jobs in the future. It shouldn't be a thing of taking over, but it should be a thing of how do we implement it so it supports us in our everyday lives and our everyday jobs. Things that your attention, your time, and your data becoming the frontier. There's so much choices out there. And, we're kind of trained in a way in what we see. AI can change all that and give us images and give us responses that we probably may not have needed, or could be bad information. And the thing is, how do we take those that are good and remove those that are bad? And then we've got to talk about privacy expectations. That will change. How comfortable are we knowing that these devices are literally integrated into our lives? You saw my video about Meta glasses. We've got the Gemini AI. We've got ChatGPT. A simple app we can install them. AI is even being more enhanced in terms of how it takes images now. The camera phone is a lot changed. Now it integrates with AI. How do you feel about these things? All right, cool. So that's the end of episode 1. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know we've gone through so much there, covered quite a lot of ground, but, just to recap, we spoke about Google's Gemini, DeepMind, creating robots, a lot more intuitive to do multiple tasks. We talk about DeepSeek, China's alternative to ChatGPT, has really, really kicked off and grown very quickly and rapidly, and is looking to scale even further in Europe. So, should we worry about there? And then we've got to talk about massive AI investment, and it's continued to pull in much more investments. I mean, if you just look at the Nvidia stock, it should just tell you how much money is just going into AI and microchips in the tech industry as a whole. But I want you to think about, these things, and these are the kind of conversations I want to have with you in Let's Talk AI. And one of them is, what AI development surprised you the most? And which one scares you? If not scare you, then which one excites you? And which kind of story would you like me to uncover next? I would love to hear your comments down below. If you did like this video, please put, like, share, subscribe with a friend. Click the bell so you don't miss out any of these Let's Talk AI episodes. Next one's coming up very soon as well. In the meantime, love, peace, and harmony. This is AI with Fizzy, and as always, stay living with AI. Peace.